Good day everyone, I am Nermina Mola, the 8th reporter of Group 2. In this video, we will be discussing the continuation of the projective methods. So I will be discussing first the sounds as projective stimuli, then the production of figure drawings, and lastly, projective methods in perspective. So first, sounds as projective stimuli. The use of sound as a projective stimulus originated in the laboratory of a then junior fellow of Harvard University, B.F. Skinner. The device was something like auditory ink blots. He believed that the technique had potential as a device for snaring out complexes. Due to switching on the equipment in his laboratory in the biology building, the rhythmic noise served as a stimulus for Skinner to create words that went along with it, and that inspired Skinner to think of an application for sound not only in behavioral terms but in the elicitation of latent verbal behavior that was significant in the Freudian sense. Then Skinner created a series of recorded sounds, much like muffled spoken vowels, to which people would be instructed to associate. He packaged the sounds as a device and called it verbal summator, and it presumably would act as a stimulus for the person to verbalize certain unconscious material. Henry Morey liked the idea, so he supplied Skinner with a room at the clinic where he could test the subjects. Saul Rosenzweig and David Shakow renamed the instrument the tautophone from the Greek word tauto, which means repeating the same, and they both did research with it. And ito yung particular na instructions nila sa mga subjects nila. Here is a phonograph. On it is a record of a man's voice saying different things. He speaks rather unclearly, so I'll play over what he says a number of times. You'll have to listen carefully, and as soon as you have some idea of what he's saying, tell me at once. So yun yung instructions na sinasabi nila sa mga subjects nila pag magkakandak na sila ng study. However, there was little compelling evidence to show that it could differentiate between members of clinical and non-clinical group. Responses to the auditory stimuli lacked the complexity and richness of responses to ink blots, pictures, and other projective stimuli. I have here some auditory projective techniques. Number 1, the auditory apperception test, developed by Stone in 1950. The subject is tasked to respond by creating a story based on 3 sounds played on a phonograph record. Other researchers produced similar tests, one called an auditory sound association test developed by Wilmer and Husney on 1951, and the auditory apperception test developed by Ball and Bernardoni on 1953. Henry Morey also got into the act with his Azagedi test that is named for a Herman Melville character. So unlike other auditory projectives, the Azagedi presented subjects with spoken paragraphs. So moving on, let us discuss the production of figure drawings. It is a relatively quick and easily administered projective technique. It can provide a psychodiagnostician with lots of clinical hypotheses to be confirmed or discarded as the results of other findings. Attempts have been made to use artistic productions as a source of information about different constructs such as intelligence, neurological intactness, visual motor coordination, cognitive development, and even learning disabilities. So because the instructions for figure drawings can be administered individually or in a group by non-clinicians such as teachers, and because no materials other than a pencil and paper are required, they are considered as an appealing source of diagnostic data. So ano nga ba ang figure drawing tests? In general, figure drawing tests is defined as a projective method of personality assessment where the assessee produces a drawing that is analyzed on the basis of its content and related variables. The classic work on the use of figure drawings as a projective stimulus is a book entitled Personality Projection in the Drawing of the Human Figure by Karen McOver. She wrote that the human figure drawn by an individual who is directed to draw a person is related intimately to the impulses, anxieties, conflicts, and compensations characteristic of that individual. In some sense, the figure drawn is the person and the paper corresponds to the environment. So we have here six projective figure drawing tests. Number one is the DAP test or Draw a Person test. It was developed by Goodenough in 1926. So in the DAP test, the examinee is given a pencil and a blank sheet of paper and told to draw a person. So right after matapos ni examinee yung first na drawing, binibigyan siya ulit ng another sheet of paper and pinapadrawing siya ulit ng another person which is opposite sex ng first na drawing niya. Subsequently, many clinicians will ask questions about the drawing such as, tell me a story about that figure, or what is the person doing, how is the person feeling, or what is nice or not nice about the person, and so on. Responses to these questions are used in forming various hypotheses and interpretations about personality functioning. In that test, attention has been given to such factors as the length of time required to complete the picture, placement of the figures, the size of the figure, pencil pressure used, symmetry, line quality, shading, the presence of erasures, facial expressions, posture, clothing, and overall appearance. So here's an example of a DAP test. So according kay Emmanuel Hammer, people project their self-image or self-concept in figure drawings. For him, figure drawings are both a reflection and a window into an individual's personality. For example, Hammer noted that in the figure drawings of males who had raped women, common features included simian-like arms, exaggerated shoulders, and features that exaggerate masculinity such as an inflated chest and arms, gaya nitong example natin, itong sa left side, because this figure is drawn by a male rapist. And according to Hammer, the slightness of the drawing and presumably of the individual's self-concept from the waist down may be compensated for by the sheer forcefulness of the upper body. A final observation with respect to this drawing is that it is devoid of clothing, a fact that itself is ripe for psychodynamic interpretation. So kung i-compare natin siya dito sa second figure, which is drawing naman siya ng isang male pedophile, it is relatively small and childlike with features representative of inadequacy. Here, inadequacy is represented not only by the size of the self-drawing but also by specific characteristics of the drawing, such as the fact that each hand has less than 5 fingers. Also, as Hammer pointed out, the introduction of the sun into a figure drawing na normal sa mga bata may signify an unmet need for nurturance on the part of a pathologically dependent adult. The excessive shading in the drawing is, according to Hammer, reflective of the great anxiety the pedophile is experiencing. The second one is the House Tree Person Test or the HTP test developed by Bach on 1948. So in the House Tree Person Test, the test taker is tasked to draw a picture of a house, a tree, and a person, just as its name suggests. The ways in which an individual represents a house and a tree are considered symbolically significant. So we have here two example of HTP test. So in this figure, as you can see, the person is in between the house and the tree, whereas in the other example, the house is in between of the tree and the person. The third one is the kinetic family drawing, or the KFD, that was developed by Burns and Kaufman in 1970. So the KFD is thought to be of particular value in learning about the examinee in relation to her or his family. The examiner instructs the child to draw a picture of themselves and everyone in his or her family doing something. Then the examinee is asked to identify each of the figures, talk about the relationship, and detail what they are doing in the picture and why. And we have here an example of the kinetic family drawing. So, mapapansin natin na lahat ng character or every member of their family as depicted in the drawing are doing something. Next is the kinetic school drawing, developed by Prout and Phillips in 1974. So the KSD, or the kinetic school drawing, is a school adaptation of the KFD. And here's an example. Next one is the kinetic drawing system, developed by Nuft and Prout in 1985. It is a test that combines aspects of the KFD and the KSD. And here's an example of KDS. And the sixth one is the collaborative drawing technique that was developed in 1985 by D.K. Smith. The collaborative drawing technique is a test that provides an occasion for family members to collaborate on the creation of a drawing, presumably all the better to draw together. So isang distinct characteristic ng collaborative drawing technique is lahat ng member ng family is nagko-collaborate sa paggawa ng drawing. So like other projective techniques thought to be clinically useful, figure drawing tests have had a rather embattled history with regard to their perceived psychometric soundness. Solid support for the validity of such approaches has been elusive, and experience and expertise do not necessarily correlate with greater clinical accuracy in drawing interpretation. So let's move on to projective methods in perspective. Being used enthusiastically by many clinicians and criticized harshly by many academics, projective methods continue to occupy a rather unique habitat in the psychological landscape. Lilienfeld et al. On 2000 raised serious questions regarding whether that habitat is worth maintaining. These authors focused their criticism on scoring systems for the Rorschach, the thematic apperception test, and figure drawings. Some of their assertions with regard to the Rorschach and the TAT are responded by a projective test user and advocate, Stephen Hibbard. So presented here in the table 12-4 are the brief sample of the cons and pros argument of projective methods. In general, critics have attacked projective methods on grounds related to the assumptions inherent in their use, the situational variables that attend their use, and several psychometric considerations. So let us discuss first the criticism on the assumptions inherent in the use of projective technique. Bernard Murstein's criticisms regarding the basic assumptions of projectives are as relevant today as they were when they were first published decades ago. Number one assumption is the more ambiguous the stimuli, the more subjects reveal about their personality. So as for Murstein's critique, he stated that the projective stimulus is only one aspect of the total stimulus situation. environmental variables, response sets, reactions to the examiner, and related factors all contribute to response patterns. Next one, projective stimuli evoke idiosyncratic nature of the responses. Mirstein argued that similarities in the response themes of different subjects to the same stimuli suggest that the stimulus material may not be as ambiguous and amenable to projection as previously assumed. Another set of assumptions, the following: every response provides meaning for personality analysis, a relationship exists between the strength of a need and its manifestation, unprojective instruments, so on and so forth, are dismissed by Mirstein as cherished beliefs accepted without the support of sufficient research validation. And last assumption is the existence of the unconscious. Mirstein criticized it and argued that though the term is widely used as if its existence were a given, some academicians have questioned whether in fact the unconscious exists in the same way that, say, the liver exists. Number two is the situational variables that attend their use. Proponents of projective techniques have claimed that such tests are capable of illuminating the mind's recesses, much like X-rays illuminate the body. Situational variables such as the examiner's presence or absence have significantly affected the responses of experimental subjects. The age of the examiner is likely to affect projective protocols, as are the specific instructions and the subtle reinforcement cues provided by the examiner. Other variables that are capable of influencing the ratings of pathology are the effect of the clinician's training and role perspective, as well as the patient's social class and motivation to manage a desired impression. The third one is the psychometric considerations. The psychometric soundness of many widely used projective instruments has yet to be demonstrated. Critics of projective techniques have called attention to variables such as uncontrolled variations in protocol length, inappropriate subject samples, inadequate control groups, and poor external criteria as factors contributing to spuriously increased ratings of validity. Ever since projectives came into widespread use, there has been raging debate between academicians who argue that projective tests are not technically sound instruments and those clinicians who find such tests useful. So we're down to my last topic, which is objective tests and projective tests. How meaningful is the dichotomy? Wiener in 2005 characterized the objective versus projective dichotomy as misleading. Truth in labeling is not served by characterizing class of tests as objective, say in the face of many questions regarding their objectivity in another class of tests as something other than objective. Observers might conclude that one group of tests is indeed objective, while the other group of tests must be subjective. As an alternative to the objective and projective dichotomy, Weiner suggested substituting the terms structured in place of the objective and unstructured in the place of the projective. The more structured a test is, the more likely it is to tap relatively conscious aspects of personality. By contrast, unstructured or ambiguous tests are more likely to access material beyond immediate or conscious awareness. So that ends my report. Thank you for listening.